before. I've been playing the consultant role for many years, and for medium to very large companies looking for an open source strategies. And eventually, I joined the SourceForge, that is one of the largest open source catalog in the internet, about 3 years ago. And actually, I am the senior director of business development for SourceForge. And in this endeavor, I've been working with the PROSE project for about 1 year. So, by the way, I will be at OSCON if any one of you will be there. It's the largest gathering of open source folks. This is going to happen from the 20th of July until the 24th. If you are there, just let me know and maybe we can talk in person. Let's start talking about what open source is. So, I suspect many of you are very familiar with a number of open source tools, applications, and operating systems. I guess the one you are looking at now are in the know. Probably you might know many of these as well, but the more we look into open source, the more we see that there are many open source tools and components out there. And one of the thing I'm going to talk about is how you can make your mind about what kind of open source components or application might suit your needs. So the first thing takeaway is the open source universe is very large, and you need somehow a way to drive yourself in this universe. The other important aspect of open source that I might call the open source promise is why people is interested in open source. No matter if you are a developer or an end user or a company or an organization, the reason why you look into open source is basically this, because over time you expect to be able to keep your costs low, if not non-existent, and you expect to see more functionalities. You expect to see security and other aspects well taken, and basically what you look for is what kind of open source tool can actually provide you with this promise, because as a matter of fact, there are many open source projects that can grant you access to this kind of promise, but not all of them. And actually, it's not really important if you are looking for a piece of code because you want to use it, or because you really want to start something new and you want to share what you do. In both cases, what you're looking for is the open source promise to be granted, because that's the only reason why you want to share something, or you want to borrow something that has been shared by someone else. Let's talk for a moment now about the business of open source. I'm not a fan of what people call open source business model. Actually, I believe there is no such a thing like an open source business model, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But I strongly believe that an open source business strategy, so a way to leverage open source within your organization, make a lot of sense for many IT endeavors. So why there is no such a thing like an open source business model? Because business models are made by a number of components. Usually we define a business model like something that helps a company or an organization to create and distribute value. And actually open source is just a little piece of that, and can help you maybe in your key activities, because just to make an example, you are Red Hat and you are distributing an open source Linux distribution, and And one of the key activities for you is to keep developing this piece of code and sharing it. But it's important also for partners because you want to engage with your community. Or if you prefer, could be part of your channels because, of course, you distribute open source just like every other piece of software, but you use also other channels to distribute your code that are not part of your commercial channel. So the community itself is a way for you to outreach a larger ecosystem. Again, for Red Hat, you can see the recent collaboration between Red Hat and CentOS that is probably the most well-known open source Linux distribution derived from Red Hat. And the collaboration with CentOS makes sense only because Red Hat can outreach to end users that could be, at some point, customers. So you see open source in many areas. I took the Red Hat example, but I can use another example on the other side, like you are Microsoft, and you do not want probably to give away your code as open source, but you have some specific needs that can be covered using open source. So open source is a key partner when you are at creating your your cloud offer, like the Azure Microsoft platform, and you need a lot of open source components, and you need to integrate them in your billing system with your other applications and the like. So in this specific case, Microsoft has an open source business strategy that involves engaging with communities, but of course it's not part of distributing open source software. They are not interested into that. They deliver open source value through their cloud platform. So I took just two very different examples to say that open source is important in many different blocks of your business model, but is not itself a business model. One thing that I would recommend you to look into if you are interested in knowing more about how you can create your open source business strategy is the framework that was created by the 451 group. And this is something that has been discussed at length until 2 or 3 years ago. And in our opinion, it's probably the best representation of all the different decisions that you need to make when you are looking for your open source business strategy. So at the center of everything, there is copyright control and how you establish this for your specific code. So if you want this completely controlled by yourself as a vendor, or if you want to give this away to a foundation. So for example, the OpenStack cloud offer at some point was the company behind this effort, Rackspace, decided to create a foundation. So when you do things like moving from the vendor approach to a foundation approach, or even a more distributed model, you need to have a sound reason to do this kind of change, and you have a specific goal in mind. So like for you, it's very important to get external contribution from third parties. In this specific case, if you retain full control of your copyright as a vendor, it will be very difficult at best to get help from others. But a foundation is a place where people and companies feel more comfortable contributing code and documentation and other stuff, just because they feel the decisions and the strategic direction is taken by a collection of identities and organizations. So probably this is more, I must say, democratic, but probably meritocratic. It applies more to this specific case. So copyright is very important. Of course, licensing, and probably you have been told before about the licensing webinar. This has been delivered a few days ago, and so you can get more information of the PROSE project about licensing. Of course, there are different ways to uh, create open source software. So you might have a development model that is very company or organization centric. This is called a cathedral, or it can be more like sort of holacracy kind of organization, bazaar-like, or it can be a mix of this model. And all these different models have different impacts on the results, because the more you retain control, again, the more people don't feel happy and comfortable with contributing code to something that you control. But on the other side, if you keep the more bazaar-like kind of approach, you need to keep in mind that you need to spend time and effort to manage the community. Recently, our company decided to distribute our platform, so the platform behind SysForge, as an Apache project. Actually, we incubated the platform at Apache. It took about 1 year to get this as a first level project at Apache. So now it's part of the Apache family. We made this because we believe it was the right choice to get help and input from others. But I can tell our engineers have been spending many, many hours, and many hours will be spent in the future to manage this community. So any decision has pros and cons, and you need to weigh them compared to which are your specific needs. Uh, let's talk now more about how you can pick up a piece of code and how you can actually measure the quality of software that is already available. This is something that works for you either if you are looking to create just use software, so borrow existing open source code, or if you want to create new one and share this. So over the last, I would say 20 years, a number of different metrics have been created and somehow pushed to the market. The first was the generally recognized as mature or secure. Uh, Actually ended to be a list of uh, secure and very mature open source applications. This is not maintained anymore. Then was the open source maturity model turn. It was in the know for a while, but basically died. Same thing for the business review rating that was created by a university in US and shared with also vendors. There was some hype back in 2006, 2007, and then this was over. And the last one that I might remember is QSOS, was part of an EU effort and originally created by Atos. It's a very interesting framework, but with no much support to measure actually those indicators. And so I'll tell you more about how we created some value on top of QSOS. Just to mention, there are many, many open source projects supported at different level by the EU. This is a collection of them. There are at least, I don't know, maybe 4, 5, 6 more. All those projects have been able to contribute something along the line of having a solid metrics in place, especially the floss metrics effort has been very helpful, creating some tools that we use to measure some open source metrics. But as you can see, there is a lot of research around this area. So at the end of the day, what you want is to be able to compare different things, and you want to do this in a way that is easy and fast. So in some cases, you are very lucky, and you can do this just with a few clicks. This is a website maintained by volunteers. It's called CMS Metrics, and it's a collection of all CMS platforms. I would say most of them are open source, if not all. And and you can choose which one you want to compare, and the comparison includes a number of information about those projects, ranging from the license to how this is developed, the kind of features, and so on. As I said, unfortunately, there are now many tools, free tools like this around. There is another one for wikis, but I'm not aware of similar sites for other applications. So the problem is you need to do some effort, you need to spend some time to make your mind, and we come up with a tool that is going to be distributed soon, hopefully by the end of this summer, and this is called SOS Open Source, and I'll tell you more about the tool now. So what the tool does is actually collecting information coming from different sources. Could be forges like SourceForge, GitHub, Codeplex, Google Code, name one. It could be also metaforges like sites collecting information coming from different forges. Probably the one you might know is OHLOH, OHLOH. There are quite a few others like Flossmo and others. So those metaforges are useful because are collecting information from different forges and make your life a little bit easier. Not always the data is up to date, so you need to keep metaforges information with a grain of salt. And there are many other tools. As I mentioned before, Flossmetrics created a number of interesting tools. PROSE is creating other tools to measure metrics. Some tools have been integrated in the Allura platform, that is the platform that SourceForge shared, as I said before, through the Apache Foundation, and is now the key component of the PROSE platform. So the PROSE platform is based on the last cutting-edge distribution of Allura, and it includes some matrix tools. Of course, there are search engines like Google or Bing and others that can help you to make your mind. And at the end of the day, the last piece is you need some expertise to make your mind, especially if you want this to be fast, because not always you have one source of information. Most of the time you have many sources of information, so you need to decide which is the most viable, and some heuristics can be needed. You may need some heuristics to do the job. So I will show you shortly how it looks like an analysis. Maybe the easiest way is to show this live. So I have a sort of beta version that is available. Let me take this. So I will show you one existing analysis, and if we have time, I can show you more how it works. But let's start with one existing analysis. So this is comparing three different open source cloud platforms. Eucalyptus, that is backed by the Eucalyptus company. Open Nebula, that was originally an EU effort and eventually became a project maintained by one company and somehow community started, but it's still backed by a vendor. And OpenStack, that I mentioned before, that is the result of a foundation effort. So let's compare those. I'm sorry, it seems like this is in Italian, but I think I will go through the report and I will comment in English. So this is the final report containing all the information. I'll get back to this later. Let me show first some. So this is a graph that compares Eucalyptus, Open Nebula, and OpenStack in terms of visibility on the internet. So there is this tool that is Google Trends providing this information, and it clearly shows which is the most visible and in the know. Of course, eucalyptus seems to be much more visible and prominent than OpenStack. The fact is, eucalyptus is not only the name of the cloud platform, but is a word per se. So you need to take, again, with a grain of salt, this kind of graphs. It's just something that you use to make your mind, but you need to keep an eye on the word and how those words are used in the real world. So let me start with the first graph that compares the different platforms in terms of sustainability. So the system makes some questions and provides some pre-filled fields that tells you about the maturity of a project. So Eucalyptus is over 3 years old. Same thing for OpenNebula, same thing for OpenStack, all very well established. And stability that looks at how the tickets are opened and closed, if that happens in an timely manner. So all of them are stabilized and actually very well maintained. So no difference here. Then looks at adoption. For adoption, the first parameter is metric is popularity. So Eucalyptus and OpenNebula are both in the know, but OpenStack is much more in the know. And it looks at reference. So if there are many reference like case studies and other kind of source of information. So for Eucalyptus, there are many case studies available. There are a few for OpenNebula and many again for OpenStack. And then books. Now books for Eucalyptus. Some books talking about OpenNebula and many books covering OpenStack. The last angle is the leadership. So the size of a team and the management style of the community. Team size are large for all of them, so over 10 members, active members in the last year. These metrics are coming from Olo, by the way. And the management style is a vendor for Eucalyptus, vendor again for OpenNebula, and community style for OpenStack. So this graph reports this information, and the way this has been weighted, so some metrics have been highlighted compared to others, especially as you can see the leadership, the OpenStack community as a better rank, and the reason is because it's the only one that is backed by a foundation. And as I said before, these give peace of mind to companies and organizations willing to join an open source project with their contributions. So in the very same way, you can analyze things like the kind of service that are provided, training and support. So for example, for Eucalyptus, you can get training, but this is limited on a specific geography, especially in a specific language, this English. For OpenNebula, same thing. You can get some training in some geographies, and the language can be limited to a couple of languages. For OpenStack, you can get this from different sources in different languages in different countries. So it's very popular and very well distributed all over the world. Support, it's only one vendor for Eucalyptus. It's a community, a sort of community for OpenNebula, and for OpenStack comes from a variety of communities. Documentation, it exists in only one language for Eucalyptus, many languages for OpenNebula, and same thing for OpenStack. And then it's the QA things. So tickets have been managed with a very clear process through tools. In some cases, tools are very used, in others are less used. So depending on how tools are used and are supported, you will rank differently. And the last two pieces are about packaging. If the application is available with a virtual appliance, a source code, or binaries, so depending on how easy it is for you to use the tool or try the tool, So if there is a virtual appliance, of course, it's very easy for you to have a look. If you need to start from the source code, it's much more complicated. And it can be pre-built for Red Hat or other distribution or Windows. So depending on what you can find on the internet, we rank it differently, the project. And the last is about maintenance. So if a code is has comments in the code, if too many languages are used, so if there is a dispersed technology dispersion, and how much is modular the code base, if it's easy to add new modules or if it's kind of monolithic software. And again, you can see how this ranks, and you can see, for example, that OpenStack is has a very good rank in terms of maintenance because it has very low technical dispersion, and the code is very well commented, and it's also available in many different packages. So just to give you the last piece, you can see also in terms of strategy how all those projects look like. So it's about licensing, if it's kind of copyleft license or is more permissive like BSD or MIT or Apache-like. So as you can see, it's very vendor-oriented, so they retain all control. Eucalyptus is copyleft license. For both OpenNebula and OpenStack is more permissive. And how easy it is to modify, to get some modification in the original code base. So for Eucalyptus, there are tools, and it's very well described how you can get this done. Same thing for OpenNebula, same thing for OpenStack. The roadmap is existing and detailed for all of them. The sponsorship for Eucalyptus is a vendor, as I said before, is a community. For OpenNebula is a foundation for OpenStack. So you compare those differences, and you see very easily that the sponsor is the metric where OpenStack looks more shiny. So all this comparison that is condensed in the first graph says one thing, that if you're looking for sharing, for getting some existing piece of code, and you want to contribute to that piece of code, you might want to look first at OpenStack, and then OpenNebula, and ultimately to Eucalyptus. So the tool makes easy for you to make this comparison and to measure metrics. And basically, that's all I had to cover the metric part. The last things I want to mention, then I will leave you some time to talk and pose questions, is about building the ecosystem. This is one of the most complex things for everyone, especially for EU project, because they have a limited lifetime, but this is difficult even for companies that have medium to long-term plans. The reason is that to build an ecosystem around your piece of code, what you need is developers. So what I heard from our product manager in our internal meeting is, I need more external developers. The problem is that developers don't come out of the blue. Developers are users first, that at some point decide that they want to do more with the piece of code, and they want to contribute back. They want to contribute back because they want their contribution as part of the original version, so that every future version will contain those modifications. Or maybe they want to be part of this because their business strategy is somehow including being part of the community. Or other reason, could be even individual reason, like I'm a developer, I want to share my skills, I want the world to look at what I'm doing, and my CV is my SourceForge or GitHub repo, and I want people to look at what I have been doing for a visible and large open source project. So whatever is your reason, first you need users. And to get users, you need to have a number of things that go beyond sharing the code. So you want people to have access to training facilities, could be webinars, could be in-person training courses or classes. You want people be able to read books about your code. So no books doesn't help to get more users. You want this to be distributed through different Linux distribution so that you can outreach the larger possible audience. And of course, among users, you have also customers. So for customers, you need to create a compelling support program that people can join. Or if it's about getting partners, you may need to have a channel program so that system integrators as well as distributors have a good reason to join you. So the more you can have users, the more you can get developers. Developers is the next stage. You don't start from developers, you start from users. And that's why EU projects have problems to deploy an open source strategy, because in a limited time frame, like 2 to 3 years, if you spend the first year planning and the second year creating code, and you wait until something is available for public consumption as a beta, you are very close to the end of a project. And you won't get people excited about something that actually is the result of something happening behind the scenes, but didn't get a chance to interact with who is creating the software, to provide feedback, to open tickets or comments. So the general take for everyone is you need to feed end users, give them a reason to test and try your software, and then you can convert a very tiny fraction of them, usually 1 on 1,000, to being an active developer of the community. And this is a process that takes time and effort, and the sooner you start, the better. Sometimes communities start from the very beginning, when you have just a blueprint describing what is your aim. I don't know how many of you have heard the story about how Linux started, but Linus Torvald one day showed up on a mailing list saying that he was creating a new kernel, and he was in the very early stage, and he wanted to know who was interested to look into his piece of code. So the earlier you share, the better. The more you provide people with tools and hints, the better. And the business strategy needs to encompass good reason for users, developers, and customers. So I think this gives you an idea of what it takes to create an open source strategy for your company or your organization.
All the best now. Bye-bye.